Yesterday morning, a Democrat from Nashville named Afton Ben, a newly elected in a special election Democrat from Davidson County, had her opportunity to bring up a member of the quote-unquote clergy to offer the opening prayer. And in doing so, she brought up I assume an ordained. I mean, the only rules regarding participation in the opening prayer is that you have to be ordained in a church in good standing with the state of Tennessee. And I assume that means, nonprofit status and all of that. And in this case, it was the United Church of Christ. I believe that's right. And this so-called preacher was a man who wants to be a woman. And many Tennesseans saw that and said, what the hell's the world coming to? And I understand that. And I understand that you consider it to be ridiculous at least and an affront to your faith at worst. Here's what I would say. And I said it in the first hour and I'll repeat it now. Be careful giving this more credence than it deserves. Sandra writes in and says, Matt, was the right move to just not be there for the prayer. And I think it was. What the Democrats want, what I truly believe the Democrats want, they do not want any prayers starting the Tennessee General Assembly. Had they their way, there would be no prayer but to government. There would be no prayer to God. And right now, you have many Republican and Democrat representatives, faithful individuals, because I do believe you can be a Democrat and still be faithful. It's becoming a little less and less obvious, and the ones that I notice are fewer and further between. But that said, it can happen. And I think that there are a subset of Democrats that would love it if this was made into a big deal. What they wanted was Cameron Sexton to say no. What they wanted was the Speaker of the House or the majority in the body to say, no, we're not going to have this on the floor of the House of Representatives. Because as soon as that happens, they're going to file a lawsuit against you. As soon as that happens, they're going to shut down all prayer to begin the Tennessee General Assembly. And do we really want that? And so what happened yesterday morning was just so happened the Republicans were meeting in caucus, and the caucus meeting ran a little bit long, so most of the Republicans in the Tennessee General Assembly actually missed this. Here's what I would say, and most of us have lost this art, and I would include myself in that number for most things, but 8212 has written it exactly right. Sometimes it's okay to just ignore stuff. This is one of those times. Do not give this oxygen and move on. Treat it as the nuisance that it is, roll your eyes about it, and move on. To suggest that it's an abomination that should have never happened is to suggest that we need a new vetting process. And when you begin vetting various religions based on who they do and do not allow as a part of the clergy, you're going to get into arenas that you don't want to get into. I promise you that. And I promise you it will end in a place that you don't want it to end. That is, it will end with nobody saying a prayer before the Tennessee General Assembly. Now, Brian writes in with a different point of view, and he said it's a direct slap in the face to God and to those of us who believe. The assembly should be ashamed of themselves. Brian, what would you have the assembly to do? Our founding fathers created a country that does not believe that government runs religion. Frankly, our founding fathers understood, I think, better than some of us understand nowadays, not you, present company notwithstanding, that anything that government touches, government takes over. And do you really want government to take over your religion too? I don't think so. The separation of church and state that Thomas Jefferson wrote about was designed to protect the church, not the state. And there was never a suggestion that religion should not be incorporated in and a part of our daily lives. The suggestion was that we cannot treat groups of people differently through government based on their religious faith. So I would tell you that if you believe that this should have been stopped, I'm open to hearing how. You know, there was a time where we didn't like the idea of Judaism or Catholicism to be a part of our regular public life here in the state of Tennessee or in the state of Alabama or in my home state of Georgia.
It was a giant deal when Kennedy got elected because he was Catholic.
Because the belief was, and I wasn't around back then, and if you were, you can tell me if I'm wrong or am I right, but I've read the history of it, that the general belief was that he was answerable not to the Constitution of the United States, he was answerable to the Pope. And the concern was that you have a president of the United States that's doing his bidding through the Catholic Church and not through the Constitution of the United States. Let's see, 8523, a lot of reaction on the super text line. 8523 writes, why would you want controversy by bringing a freak up to offend people's beliefs? The scary part of everything that is going on in society is that these godless scum get elected into office in the first place. I understand that there are people in Nashville, Tennessee that vote quite differently than I would. One of the greatest hopes of humanity is that we have people that are stupider than you and me that are allowed to vote in the United States of America. And I know if you don't really understand, I mean, that sentence can make no sense, but it is true. It is the greatest asset and failure that we have going that we don't have intelligence testing to vote. I wish that we did. I say that, but I don't know that I wish that we did. 5650 writes in and confirms what I have read. I'm 72 and my parents felt, yes, the Pope would run America. It did not happen. One of my favorites, JFK. JFK would absolutely be a Republican today. Now, he might be considered a squish, but he would definitely be a Republican. I mean, the guy cut taxes, for goodness sake. I've long said, and remember it, write it down, it's one of the best things I've ever said on this radio show, and I've been saying it for 20 years. As a result, today's Republicans are yesterday's Democrats. Today's Democrats are yesterday's socialists. I have no idea where the conservatives are. No idea. I agree 100% with you, writes 5331. I wish I could explain this specific subject the way you did on this segment. It's not that hard. Faith supersedes force. This is the way that I view the relationship between government and religion. Faith supersedes force. For the so many years that Roe v. Wade was the quote-unquote law of the land, I considered it an abomination of my religious faith. But that does not mean that I did not recognize it as the law of the land. I thought it was a shame. I thought it was a travesty. I thought it was an abomination based on my faith-based beliefs. And it does not necessarily mean that I agreed with it, nor that I abide by it. My faith superseded the force of the rule of law. Always has and always will. My faith is not affected by the force of government. Never has. And never will. 2565, just tuned in, missed the topic. Can you quickly summarize? Yesterday, every day, a member of the House of Representatives can schedule a pastor to give the opening prayer before the General Assembly. And yesterday, the opening prayer was given by a transgendered person who claimed to be a pastor, and I assume is a pastor at the United Church of Christ. And that has a lot of folks upset. And some are suggesting that Cameron Sexton and others should have done something to stop it. I am suggesting that if you get into the business of evaluating who is and is not an appropriate pastor to lead a prayer before the General Assembly, you're going to be deluged with lawsuits to the point that you'll never have a prayer again. You'll never have a prayer again. 5668 says, tell them to get on YouTube and rewind. Miss a moment and miss a lot of the Matt Murphy Show.